It was about 2-3 years ago when I started getting a bunch of calls. They're like, Eric, we got this property. We like what you're doing over here. I already had set a great example of how to do the work. I started getting calls here and there. And I think in 1 month, I got about 10 contracts. And then I turned around and I looked at my wife. I think I got a business.
Erik Perez, thank you for joining me this morning.
Hey, thank you, Chris, for having me.
Appreciate you driving out in the rain from Palos Verdes.
That's right.
I know it was tough to leave Palos Verdes, that beautiful $1 million home on the hill overlooking the ocean, Catalina.
It was foggy this morning, but yeah, definitely.
Oh, yeah, one day, right? Well,
That's right.
Well, you're right up on that elevation level.
I
so
am.
you're going to hit being a pilot. I used to fly over Palos Verdes all the time.
Oh, really?
Down the 110 from Compton all the way out, and I'd go out and we'd have fun, fly around the Trump golf course. That came later because I've been flying for a long time. But yeah, the layer just sits like 1,500 there, and it just comes right over the top of the hill over Torrance Airport there.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
A lot of
Oh,
fun.
that's nice out there. Yeah, I'm right around the corner from the golf course, actually.
Nice.
About 5 minutes away from
And how long have you been there?
I want to say 4 or 5 months.
You just bought it.
That's right. Yeah.
And you came from? Where?
From Riverside, Inland
Riverside.
Empire. Yeah,
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, we were out there for 6-7 years. Business started growing more on the LA County side, so it only made sense to move out here.
So you're kind of like the Jefferson. You went from the ghetto to Palos Verdes. You're moving up.
That's right. I like to think of it that way.
I'm just messing with you. I know it was all hard work, right? From a security company?
That's
Can
right.
we say that?
That's right. Security company.
Okay. Well,
16 years in the works.
16. Has it really been that long?
That's right. 16 years.
Okay. Well, let's go back because I'd love everybody to know a little bit about you. So tell me about you. Tell me about let's go back to childhood. How big's your family? Where did this all kind of come from?
Family of 5. So my parents, the youngest of 3. I have an older brother, sister right in the middle, and I'm the youngest. I grew up in the Hollywood area, so born and raised in LA. A little tough out there. Just jumping. I think I went to maybe just talking to my wife the other day because we had to change my daughter's schools recently. So I was talking to my daughter and I was telling her, it's going to be okay. I went to 4 different elementary schools. When the neighborhood got a little tough, a little bit bad, my parents would move us, but they move us maybe, 3 blocks on the street, and then when that got a little bad, they moved us again, but they made an effort to get us away from that, so 4 or 5 different elementary schools.
So was it like from shootings to only using knives to fisticuffs, or what was it?
Yeah, the drug sales,
okay,
drug sales.
Okay.
We got our vehicle stolen a couple of times. So
Yeah.
we jumped around, but it's funny because we only stayed around the East Hollywood, Silver Lake, and Echo Park area. It was like that whole generation.
In Hollywood.
Correct, yeah.
Boy, and you didn't cross over, huh? That's pretty good.
I went to all the local schools there, but I learned a lot. I'm actually kind of thankful for that background. You're on the streets, and you hang out with the backgrounds, and it actually helped me later on in life. So I'm sure we'll talk about it in law enforcement and security.
Yeah. So do you speak Spanish?
No, fluent. I actually
fluent?
took a year of Spanish in high school.
Okay.
Just to perfect it so I can read, write, and speak it. Very
Really?
fluently.
Say something in Spanish to me.
Hola, Chris, ¿cómo estás?
Oh, there you go. Okay, that sounded real.
Yeah.
Okay, well, very good. So, family of how many?
5. I'm the youngest of 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what'd your mom and dad do?
My dad was always, he was always in those, blue collar jobs. He did maintenance for so many years. He held 2 jobs for, I want to say, close to 15, 16 years. So I'll hardly get to see him. He'll have maybe Sunday mornings off, and he'll take me to Little League. I used to love playing baseball. My mom just worked in, she was a cosmetologist actually for about 15, 20 years. She cut my hair growing up. I didn't visit my first barbershop until maybe after high school.
Wow.
Yeah, and then just little jobs here and there. They struggle, obviously like anything else. But I had a happy childhood. You don't think about those things when you get older. You just you do reflect back. You're like, wow, we had some tough times, but we were happy. We were happy. I played around outside on the streets. With kids don't do that nowadays.
No, they don't do that at all. How old are you now?
I'm 42.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, you're still a baby. I still think you're a
Yeah,
baby.
right.
That's a great age, though. So, okay, so let's get into this. You big college guy? What?
Yeah,
High school?
so I
What?
graduated high school. I hated school, but I was very good at it. I hung around with the, just like anybody else in the, in the big city. You hang out with the bad crowd. I got into trouble a lot. I went to, I decided to go to college. I actually went in for graphic design, believe it or not, completely different than what I do now. And that's because my dad during high school used to take me to work with him. He used to do janitorial and maintenance work at this printing company out in Monterey Park. And he would take me there. So he, early on, he taught me work ethic, show up to work. And eventually he got promoted and moved to another job site. And I actually stayed there and worked. And I was 16 years old. And so that taught me a lot. Obviously, that prepared me later on in life. You don't realize it at that moment, but then you look back and you're like, wow, I can't believe that actually prepared me for life. So I did that. I wasn't really planning to go to college, but I was really good at school. I was a very smart guy, book smart too. And I decided to go to graphic design because one of the guys that I met there at that printing company told me, hey, what are you planning to do with your life? And I said, I don't know. So you should get, you should be graphic design. They pay really good money, and maybe you should give that a shot. So that's what I did. I went into 2-year college. I got an associate's degree in graphic design. Upon graduation, it took me maybe about 3 to 4 months to find a job in that field. I ended up getting a job out in Gardena, and what we would do there, we just use just Photoshop editing. And our main job there was we used to get the high school seniors yearbooks, and they'll put in requests. They'll want their braces removed. They'll want their blemishes removed. So I was kind of like the Photoshop doctor. I'll go in there and edit all those blemishes, take away their yeah. So that's what I did for about 6 months, and then everybody got laid off. And that's when I decided my next move, and the next move was law enforcement.
Okay, so now law enforcement wasn't in the DNA, right? You just thought, okay, I'm going to do. It was money situation. You're thinking, I want to make some money.
It was money. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was money, and obviously college was great, but I was very impatient. I was more like I want to make money now, and so that was it.
Okay.
I wanna make money now, yeah.
So let's get into that law enforcement.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, that happened actually by accident. So my dad actually retired. He had open heart surgery. And the doctor said, you can't be doing what you're doing anymore. So that was a big change for us. It was actually a huge struggle at the beginning. My parents decided to sell their home, and they lived out by the Griffith Park area. Beautiful area. They bought it back in the 90s. He decided to sell the house, and they moved to Imperial County, which nobody really knows about. That's east of San Diego County, a border town called El Centro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? In El Centro?
El Centro, yeah.
That's the where the Air Force flies around.
Yeah.
To do the training.
Yeah, got the Naval Air
Best
Force.
weather over there for winners.
Correct, yeah. They got they got the Blue Angels. They
that's
fly
right.
out there. Yeah, they got great shows out there. So he sold the house, bought a home out there in El Centro. And the reason was because my mom she's from Mexicali, which is a border town there in Mexico. And they owned a home that they built back in the 80s. Their goal was to one day retire and go live out in Mexico. Obviously, plans changed. That never happened. But they wanted to be closer to that property. And so when they moved out there, I either had a choice to stay here and figure out what I wanted to do, or maybe go out there and maybe try it out. So I gave it a shot. I moved out there with my parents. At that point, my brother and my sister, they were all in their own little worlds. They were doing their own thing. So I moved out with them because I was the youngest. I must have been maybe 21 at that time. I go out there, and right on my block, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 houses over, a cop lived there. And, he would always drive by, go to lunch. He'll go home and eat lunch there with his family. I'm like, man, that's cool. And it was obviously El Centro Police. So I decided to call them in. I gave them a call, and I spoke to one of the recruiters. And I still remember his name, Sergeant Mason. And I asked him, I said, hey, I just moved out here from L.A. I'm interested in law enforcement. What do you recommend? And he told me, you know what, I would put myself through the academy. There's one in San Diego. It's going to be an extended format, so maybe 11 or 12 months part time, and that'll probably get the wheels moving. That'll show your dedication that you really want to do this since you're putting yourself through the academy, and maybe give me a call back. When you're about to graduate. So I said, okay. So I went in there just blindsided. I had no idea what law enforcement was or anything of it. So I signed up. I went to Southwestern College, which is in Chula Vista. I believe it still exists to this day. Police Academy. I enrolled in the summer of 2003. And I went there. I did 11, 12 months. While I was in the academy, I actually worked part-time security, because I got bills to pay. So I put myself through the academy. I had a part-time job. I had a day shift, and then I switched to graveyard shift so I could have some time to study. And about 3 months prior to graduation, I put in my application for El Centro PD. And I put it in. I went through the process. There was 3 of us in the academy that were actually applying for that one position they had left. And thankfully, out of all 3, I'm the one that got the job. So upon graduation, thankfully, I had a job waiting for me. I graduated, if I'm not mistaken, on a Friday. I had that weekend off, and I went 10-8 on Monday morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
Went straight to training?
Straight to training.
Yeah, you guys didn't do any. Well, El Centro's really small. So
I believe it was a 6-month field training. So it was a pretty good field training program. I did 6 months, and obviously had some challenges along the way. I got injured along the way, and came back, so they had to extend my field training program. And then once I finished that, I was solo. It was a small department, so you kind of go out solo. Mm-hmm. But what I loved about that is once I was there, my goal was to kind of get my foot in the door, maybe do 2, 3, 4 years, and transfer back to LA. My dream job once I got to law enforcement was to apply for LAPD and maybe work the Hollywood division.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
That was my dream job, LAPD Hollywood division, just because I knew how everything was, the streets and everything. But and then obviously it just took a different turn. I ended up just going into private security after that.
So what'd you get injured? How'd you get injured on training?
You know what? We were on a foot pursuit, and I was still on training, and it was maybe 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. We got a stabbing call. So they put it out. There was a couple officers who already had arrived on scene. They gave the description. I still remember to this day, sticks in back. You remember, it was a white shirt, a guy with a white bloody shirt, who was the main suspect, took off, and they had a house party. That's how it all started. He stabbed someone. He ran. That happens to be that house was right next to the railroad tracks. So when he ran and we saw him running, me and my field training officer, we ran. It was pitch dark, 2 a.m. in the morning, and I actually stepped over one of the railroad tracks, and boom, I heard my back just crack.
Oh,
yeah. I had a hard time getting up, and that took me off maybe through therapy and seeing doctors and injections and all that. I was afraid that I was going to have a pinched nerve. That was what they were saying, which was going to require surgery.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I was still young, and I healed correctly, and I think it took me about 3-4 months, and then I went back out. But yeah, that was a pretty tough experience,
Yeah,
it kind of make me wonder, if I was going to go back or not.
Yeah, it's a hard thing for them because you're getting your post certificate, they're hiring you,
exactly.
Then you come off training, and then you're injured.
And then that happens. Yeah,
it's not good.
Yeah.
All right. So you go down and you want to be LAPD, but then you decide to change and you want to be. What did you sure you didn't hit your head because are you going to go into security? You're going to pass up the LAPD job at that time? Well, it's actually probably a smarter move.
Yeah.
Myself being former law enforcement, I look back today, but during that time period, it may have been a little different. I mean, it was fun, I think, when I was doing it, but now you got your hands tied.
Wow. Yeah. Different times, And I say it to this day. I got a buddy of mine, he recently retired, and we talk about that, This was back in the days. It was a little different, definitely. Yeah. So, private security was it happened by accident as well, and during my days off in El Centro, my sister and brother lived in LA, so I would go out to their house, and I met this guy, and I stumbled across this guy through just networking with other guys, and he had a transportation company. He'll do the TCP driving, taking people to the airport and so forth. And he came across a client of his who was holding an open house. He's a big time real estate agent here in LA. He's still here. And he was holding $20-30 million open houses, and he was looking for security. So he told me, hey, how would you like to do security for these open houses? And I'm saying, yeah, sure. Hey, I got a couple of days off next week, let's do it. So he set me up and we connected. I connected with the real estate agent, and I was, doing private security for open houses. And, I was charging a certain amount. I'm like, wow, I think in 2 or 3 days I made as much as I will make in a week in law enforcement. So that just kind of, that kind of led one thing to another. And I realized, there's some money to be made in private security. So I took the big leap of faith. I eventually gave my 2-week notice after a few years in law enforcement, and I resigned, and I went out and explored, and I went out and ventured into private security.
Yeah, well, you kind of started with a good model.
Yeah,
right. You're doing,
exactly.
$20-30 million homes, and then when did reality hit you when you said, "Oh, I got to get some employees and go get into the multi-housing industry"? When did that take place? Because that didn't go on forever, right?
No.
Did that fade off, and then you said, "Hey, I got to go expand and look at different verticals"?
Exactly. Yeah. So it was a little tougher for me. My very first contract was in private security was in Pasadena, 24/7. I had to hire about 6 guards right away. So right off the bat, it just hit me really quick. Hey, you got to get some employees, and set all that up. So yeah, that was very tough. That was very tough. Going from law enforcement and kind of being solo for a long time, and then managing a team right away. It obviously had its challenges. The biggest challenge for me there at the beginning was, believe it or not, when I look back now, it was the financial part. You don't realize that some of these clients don't pay you on time. So, you start realizing you're running out of cash. These guys expect to get paid every 2 weeks. They don't care if you get paid or not. You got to pay these guys. So you have to make payroll. And there was a lot of times where, I don't know how I did it, and you have to make payroll. And a lot of people don't think about that when they get into private security or running their own business. You got to be financially prepared.
So my first security business, I grew it so big in the beginning, and like you, they all told me, "Oh, no problem. We pay quickly." I had to shut down my first security business. I had to go through my credit cards.
Yeah.
I lost my credit in order to pay the employees and think about that. Had to shut down my first security business because I grew too big too fast.
Yeah.
And I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't a business guy. Like you, I didn't go to college.
Yeah.
I should have. People get, I always tell people, and you hear this in the podcast all the time, I got into business, went to school for sure, but it's just a shame, that you have to do that because I had to work the cars,
Exactly.
So let me ask a question. So what do you think the hardest lesson you've learned about running a private security that you wish you knew when you first started?
It was that
the biggest pain point?
Financially, educated. Obviously, they don't teach you that in school.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know anything about building up credit. Getting a few credit cards. I didn't have any credit cards when I started my business. I think there was a couple of times I had to borrow money, to make payroll. But I think that's probably the biggest. I wish I knew that. I wish somebody would tell me, hey, you're going to need some cash flow. You're going to need some reserves to pay these guys because you might not see a check for 30 to 60 days.
If you're lucky.
And what I ended up doing was it got so bad to the point where I mismanaged it so much as far as, not getting paid on time, where I had to lay off at least half of my workforce. And the reason was I ended up taking on, and I was working 16 hours, 7 days a week. So that way I only had one other security guard that I had to pay on payroll. So my payroll and operational costs can be a little lower. So I had to work 16 hours straight, 7 days a week, and I did that maybe for about over a year.
And this was all standing accounts, right? You didn't get into patrol at that time.
No, it was all standing accounts. It was a vacant hospital. It was 13-acre property, and it was a combination of residential homes, a vacant hospital, and a medical building. So it was a large property. Yeah.
Okay, so you had to work. Were you married at the time?
No, I wasn't. I didn't have any kids or any of that, so that kind of helped me a lot too at the beginning. I guess I had all the time in the world. Even in law enforcement, I was single. I didn't have any kids, so I felt like that played a big factor. Otherwise, I'm not sure if I would have done it.
Yeah, well, law enforcement, the longer you would have stayed with that, you either would have been a drunk or an asshole, one of the two. And then, and then you get into job security, and then the department itself is a gang. You got your buddies that don't want you to go, and you get involved in that little clique at the time.
That's right.
It makes it,
Yeah, and that definitely existed
big
there.
Risk. And who wants to go back? And who wants to go back as law enforcement into a security job? Right? I'm going to be a security guard.
That's true. Yeah, and I thought about it. I was, after those first lessons, I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe this isn't for me. I should just go back to law enforcement. And I really thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
There was twice in the, maybe twice in the past 16 years where I actually was this close of reapplying somewhere. Because I was like, maybe I'm not cut out for running a business. But, I never gave up. I never gave up, and you got to just keep on going.
I try to share that with a lot of people. And, in any business, you can't give up. Everybody thinks it's just going to be grandiose, right? They have no idea what's involved in it, no matter what business you get in. And I've learned this, obviously, throughout the years that, the word entrepreneur is you're going to go through hard times. If you're not having problems, you're not doing something right, right? There's
right.
problems, always problems. There's
Exactly.
good times, but definitely bad times, and it's just staying the course. It's all part of learning, no matter how educated you are.
That's right.
This is a whole different world for people, to get
And
involved
that's the only
in.
way you're going to learn.
Yeah.
It's by mistakes, failures along the way, and it prepares you later down the road. When I look back now after 16 years, I don't think I'll be where I am if it wasn't for those tough times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have to borrow money from anybody?
I did. I borrowed money from friends and family to make payroll, either because I got a new contract, I had to buy uniforms. So little things you don't think about, when you start a business.
Yeah. And when you start borrowing money from family and friends, the pressure's really on because you don't want to let them down.
That's right.
So now you're working harder, right?
Exactly.
To try to get them paid back, prove it out that, hey, I'm here, right?
That's right.
And then everybody wants to know why you're never around and how come you don't call me anymore, right?
right.
Because everybody thinks that you're a big business guy and you're making all this money with the security business and you're so successful, but they have no idea what the pain is, that it's a 24-hour business. You're dealing with employees. You're dealing with clients, right? You have to be a therapist for your employees. You got to keep them motivated because we're not paying them a bunch of money.
That's true.
Right? Yeah. It's minimum wage at the time. In fact, back then, now for me, it was definitely minimum wage.
Yeah, exactly.
And for you in 2000, right? Because I had 4 or 5 security companies in my lifetime.
Wow.
All right. How many have you had in your lifetime? Same name from start?
Yeah.
Really? Not
First and only
close
one.
Down?
No.
Never had to close
No.
down and reboot?
No. I was on the brink of shutting down my doors. And it wasn't by choice. It was just unfortunate events. Like that Pasadena contract. I had it for 5 years. It was during the real estate crash of 2008. The property went into receivership. Property management took over. Eventually, the property was sold, and then the owner came in and says, no, we're going to cut the cost. I don't need 24/7 security. I'm going to put up a fence and let a dog loose, and that's my security. So I went from that to practically I was down to one contract downtown LA, vacant property with another client management company. I had to go and work that, graveyard. My wife at the time, she's still my
So
wife.
now you're married?
Yeah, now I'm married at this point. I got married 3-4 years after I started my business. She'll come with me at night.
Really?
She'll sleep in the back, and we'll trade.
She have a sister?
Yeah. Was that? Yeah.
She have a sister?
No, only child.
Okay.
Yeah, and she'll come and sleep in the back of the truck. I still remember those days. And then, when I'll get tired, I'll go to sleep, and then she'll take over. That was our very last standing contract, and I was this close of just giving it all up, But then I just kept, like you said, you never give up. You keep on going, and you just hope for the best. You start, you get a little desperate. You start emailing the whole world. Hey, you have any other contracts? People that you've met. At this point, I was in my 5 years. I was already in 5 years, and you know what they say. If most businesses they don't even go past 5 years, and I always had that in the back of my mind. I said I don't want to be another statistic. So I'm gonna keep on going.
Well, I'll tell you right now, I've never met your wife, but she's in the back of the truck and helping you out.
Yeah.
That says a lot. I'm sure you never forgot that.
No. She was there, during my lowest times and now during my high times. For
Yeah,
sure.
see, now people listening to this podcast say, listen, honey, listen to this. This guy's wife went out and actually helped him in the jump. She's like, I don't care who. She's crazy. I'm not going to.
Exactly.
And all joking aside, that's really a cool. So let me ask you, so what stage in time, as far as any small operation mistakes that you made in the past, is there anything that you did where did the business really start to turn, I guess? Now let me just say this. It sounded like you had some pretty good luck because you talk about some of the contracts you had.
Yeah.
Right. I started with apartment communities and I learned my lesson. That's probably one of the worst clients. They're going to kill me, whoever's listening to this, but it's not, that's where everybody goes first.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
And so obviously you had some pretty good luck with some of the contracts starting out.
Yeah.
I know you lost them, but
Yeah.
what was a pivot? What was a turning point where you go, hey, I think I got this. I'm going to do this. I think this is the business we need to go to. This is the way and who I need to hire. Am I making sense? When did you have that kind of a moment? Anytime where you say, okay, I got this now?
You know what? I know it sounds strange, but that just happened to me maybe 2-3 years ago.
I believe it.
Yeah. I think the first 12 years of being in business, it was more of just surviving, and I didn't realize that I had a business. I was just more of, this pays the bills. And I didn't look at it as business. I think 2-3 years ago, there was, like you talk about that pivot, that moment where I started getting a lot of calls. And most of my business, all of my business actually to this day, has been zero marketing, has been word of mouth. And so I got very lucky with that. But I started getting a lot of calls. They started seeing the work that I was doing. And most of the work, and I'm sure you can relate to this, I was doing it myself. I was doing patrols by myself. I worked, I want to say, and I'm not even exaggerating, I think it was 12 years, and you can ask my wife, 7 days a week, 7 nights a week for 12 years straight.
Yeah, you got a hell of a wife.
Yeah.
You've been
12
married
years.
one time?
Yeah. We've been married for the 12 years. So ever since she met me, I worked every single night for 12 years straight. And obviously I still go out in the field. I don't have to go out every night. But it was about 2-3 years ago when I started getting a bunch of calls. They're like, Erik, we got this property. We like what you're doing over here. Because I already had, I already had set a great example of how to do the work. I started getting calls here and there. And I think in 1 month, I still remember this day, in 1 month, I got about 10 contracts just in 1 month. And then I turned around and I looked at my wife. I think I got a business. And that's when I realized, okay, this is serious. I got to start hiring people. And scarcity always plays a factor. The fear of growth. I didn't want to, deal with employees like anybody else does, So that was my biggest fear. It was growing. It's dealing with, the headaches, responsibility, dealing with the guards not showing up to work. But, you got to just find great people. When I took the leap of faith and I said, no, I got to do this. And I started, getting supervisors, people helping me run the business. And that's when it just kind of took off from there. And this is only 2-3 years ago.
Okay, so obviously you had to maintain. So how did you maintain a strong client relationship, especially when things didn't go perfect on the ground? Because that's a big part of it is relationship, and it was you, right? We're talking here now. We're talking to small to mid-level operators, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And everybody, I think, that is in the business is working the car. A serious entrepreneur. There's very few people I've ever heard saying, yeah, Daddy gave me some money, and I threw a guy I know that said he could run my business. No. Small to mid-level, we all have these pain points, and that's the purpose of this podcast is I want people to hear from you and other people, we're twins. Okay, we've all gone through this thing. So how did you maintain those relationships? And then when we talk about employees, you say getting a great team. That's just, we all say that. I'm going to go get me a great team.
Yeah.
I thought myself, I came from law enforcement background. I think I'm pretty personable. I'm going to bring good people. I'm going to treat them right. I'm going to give them good uniforms. I'm going to give them great cars. I'm going to pay them on time. Well, I gave them all that, and I still got screwed, right? They damaged my cars. They tore up my patches. I mean, and it can really
Yeah.
give you a bad taste. And there wasn't enough chocolate to put on my mouth to remove the bad taste, right? But again, you need them.
Yeah.
And then eventually you find that eagle on a cliff that you can massage. And I think that's what a lot of operators get into trouble with, is that they make promises. They mean well, right? As an owner, you go out and you work in the car and say, hey, buddy, I really appreciate your help. I just want to take Friday, Saturday off. You can help me out.
Yeah.
It turns into a relationship. But again, that gets abused, or promises are made, and you can only give them so many captain bars and stripes to keep them motivated, right?
Yeah.
And gift certificates to a movie or a trip to Catalina for the weekend to where they feel like they're getting abused, especially if they have family, because this is a 24-hour business,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Problems. You go out and patrol, you try to sleep, and you're taking phone calls, and you're always on the phone trying to handle the problems and the issues. And when you're dealing with multi-housing, if it's a 400 unit, it's 800 people. You got two sets of two people in there that can do nothing but complain about your service.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So a little bit about that. How did you, for people that are listening, what do you think the most important thing it is to maintain a contract to keep business? Because instead of winning 4 contracts, have you ever done that?
Yeah.
Win 4, lose 1, win 5, lose 2,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's just this churn,
Yeah.
right? So let's get real. What did you really do or what was it that kept your contracts? People,
You know what?
Relationships, what?
It's communication, I think. I think the communication is key, and I'll tell you why. Every time I was granted a new contract, the first thing they'll tell me is maybe a month or 2 had gone by and they hadn't even heard or seen a report from that previous security company. So right there and then they gave me the biggest clue, is they want communication. They want to know what's going on at their properties. So I made sure that every contract that I got, I kept them in the loop. I sent them daily, weekly reports with pictures attached, with everything. And I felt like once I almost kind of got them involved and made them a partner in this, they felt like, okay, this guy's really taking care of our property. Obviously nothing's perfect. Things kind of go sideways. Sometimes things get missed. There's always the small things that get you in trouble, right, in this field. But I think communication, having that communication with the client is the key to keeping.
In 2000 again?
2008, yeah.
2008. I think that's when I was just working on SilverTrek or finishing up SilverTrek. SilverTrek software, that was a real-time reporting tool. As you know, you were a customer later on, but I used that for my security business. And then I sold my security business after I developed it because I figured I was going to run out and show everybody, hey, look at this great tool. Look what you can do. But mobile devices were $500 a piece, and this is before BlackBerry. There was no Android. There was no mobile. There was no Apple. Okay? So in 2008, what kept your clients? Was it a written report? It wasn't a DEGI tool. What was it that kept your clients? Because there's always problems. Them sleeping. Accountability, the word accountability was a big issue. I'm accountable. And you threw out probably ex-law enforcement background. And hire good people, right? I'm out in the field. I'm responsible. I'm here working the contract myself. And that's when at the beginning, you start cranking because it turns into 10 or 12 counts because you're the one doing the work and you're the one making the phone calls all the time. But then you got to step away. So what were you using or what were you doing, honestly? I know you're going to be honest, but because the reporting tools weren't there yet.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, actually. Looking back, I think there was no reporting software. It was more emails and pictures. And I was trying to do something a little different than your average security company in that time that nobody else was doing. When I had that first Pasadena contract that I mentioned earlier, there was no on-site day porter, maintenance, or janitorial. There was a gardening service. He'll come around once a week. So what I ended up doing, I took it upon myself to start doing and picking up little trash, reporting, maintenance issues. There's a water leak here. There's this window is, doesn't close all the way. So I started kind of going out of my way and doing a little bit more than just your typical security work. And it just blew all the clients away.
Yes, you brought your janitorial experience
everything.
into this.
That's right.
Isn't that funny,
That's right?
You say, hey, I know a little bit about janitorial. I know what they care about. So, so you're going the extra mile.
Exactly.
And what are you being? A partner.
Correct.
Not a vendor.
Exactly.
Same concept. I had because of what? because the employees were going to keep doing what they're going to do, right? Yeah. Everybody else came from the same gene pool, right?
That's right.
But every owner thinks that I'm doing something different than the next guy. A very competitive field, right, with everybody. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Old school, be a partner. And today, it's the same way.
It is.
Right.
Nothing has changed.
The problem is we just kind of divert from the clients, or we get too big for our britches and we figure my operation guy can handle this, or let me get a weekly sync going. How's everything going? Oh, it's a 10. I talked to her. I couldn't reach her, but she said everything was good, right? So scary times.
Oh, no. Yeah,
scary times.
Yeah.
Interesting. So when did you, so let's go back to that and maybe interrupt you. Tell me, you're going the extra mile for the clients. You're being a partner. Correct. What else did you do?
So what I started doing is I took it upon myself to pictures. I think pictures is the number one thing, obviously. Like they say, right, if you don't have a picture, it never happened. So I started documenting all these little things that I would do because obviously I wanted to take credit for it, and I want the client to know I'm going the extra mile. So, we had, I still remember to this day, we had a huge water leak in the basement. It was a vacant hospital. I happened to do my patrols. Thankfully, I arrived just in time. The basement was maybe halfway flooded. I got on the phone. I called. I had a plumber's number. Just happened to be there was a guy who had just done some plumbing work there. So I called him first, and I said, hey, we got this flood going on. And this is without the client's approval. I just took it upon myself to give him a call. Without the client's approval. And I told him, we got a big flood. Like, can you guys send someone out here? And, obviously he still remembered, I'm the security guard you met last week. So he starts, sending people out. Then I called the client. And I told the client, I said, hey, we got a huge water leak here. I said, I hope you don't mind, but the plumber that came last week, I had his number. I called him, and I told him I took it upon myself to come out and take care of this big old flood that we have going on. And things could go either, they could either be, hey, thank you, or why did you do that? No, she was like, oh, thank you. You went the extra mile. So that saved us a lot of money. It saved her a lot of money. But yeah, I would just document water leaks, any lights that were out. Back in the day, security, you'll document those things, but those things still get overlooked nowadays. So I'll do, any exterior lighting that was out, plumbing issues, electrical issues, any doors, any maintenance. And some of the tenants will even call me. Hey, Eric, we got an issue with our doors not locking properly. And I'll go the extra mile to try to even fix it myself too.
Yeah.
And I'll document it. So, I'll do before and after. But yeah, I think just those little things came a long way. And even to this day, we try to do that as well.
Yeah. And that's where it all, same thing. That's how Silvertrack came about, managing the parking and doing all that work I was doing. But again, it's understanding your client. And do they really appreciate that? And then the problem is you're providing that great service. Mm-hmm. And then what happens, Eric's no longer working the property. And now the officer is on there. And she says, hey, Eric, what happened? I used to get these great photos from you. And you got to go, well, that's because I was out there and I was doing the work, right? You run into all that. So let's go back to employees, and I want to get into real-time reporting, some of the steps of that. What do you really do different? You can say it for today or in the past. What have you learned in retaining good employees? What's going to take to bring a good employee to your team?
It's been a combination of a lot of things, but I think what actually has worked for me is
you hired all your family.
No, actually, okay. I haven't. To this day, it's only been a brother and a cousin.
Joking.
But yeah, I wish I could, but I didn't have that big of a large family to hire. But I think what's worked for me is just having that personal relationship with them, and there's a fine line with that. Obviously, you can't get too personal with them, because sometimes they'll take advantage of that. But I felt that the relationship that I have with each of my guards, it's more than just business. It's more on a personal level. I actually take the time to get to know them. I actually still to this day, I go out on the field and train each one of them individually, and just kind of connecting with them. Asking them about their families as well. What do they have going on in their lives? Anything they need help with. And then just kind of building that, relationship with them makes them feel that they're part of the family. It's come a long way, It's come a long way. It sounds very simple, but it's actually worked miracles for me.
No, I've told that, and talking to, obviously, and coaching some security companies, told them the same thing with your operations team. It's not just go out to supervise, to enforce. It's to educate, change behavior, of course, but be personal about it. And it's simply just going on to the contracted site and saying, hey, for an example, if you were the employee and I was the supervisor, Eric, how you doing? Great. How's your day? How long you been here? Hey, you obviously know this place better than anybody. Let's go for a walk. Tell me what you think. And just let that guy talk. He's going to tell you all about the job site. You need to know it as an operations guy anyhow. So when you're hiring and doing things, you know what things need to be fulfilled. Yeah. It's going to tell you about everything about the contract, but just taking that time to be personal. But most important, ask them, anything coming up? Are you happy with the job? How's family? How are the kids? You get more from it as far as their pain points and they're struggling with, right? It's going to tell you whether he's going to keep this job, whether he's going to need this weekend off. It tells you a whole lot. And then again, don't lie to them. Don't say, okay, well, I'll see you in a couple hours, and you never come back. They only say that because they want the guy to think, well, I'm still checking on you, so I'm going to come back in a couple hours. Say what you mean and do what you say.
Exactly.
Super important. So thank you for that input.
Definitely.
So what do you think has been your biggest headache when dealing with clients, especially when you know your team is right?
Well, like you mentioned, I think the biggest hurdle now is, like you say, they have a certain expectation, of you and the guards. And like you said, I kind of spoiled them a little bit. It was a hard transition, me kind of doing everything on my own because they had a set expectation. And then, like you mentioned, you hire guards and they're not doing the same thing that you're doing, But so I think just talking to the client too, I've had just recently, as a matter of fact, that happened. I'm not going to name any names, but they wanted us to do things that, we just didn't think it was part of our security duties, and it wasn't in janitorial. We don't mind doing that, but it was something that just kind of blew me off. And I think when that happens, you have to make that phone call and talk to the client and maybe set the boundaries straight and, and the expectations and tell them, hey, we can do this for you, but don't expect that. Unfortunately, that's not part of our duties. And so forth. So I feel like maybe having some clarity there with the client, it can avoid a lot of issues down the road, and then maybe calling you, be like, hey, why was this missed? Why wasn't this done? Why is your crew doing that? Or why were you doing it before and now you're not doing it? And it becomes an issue. So right off the bat, you got to be clear with them as to what the duties are, what the expectations are. Even do a walkthrough with them for the large contracts. Like recently we got one. You got to do a walkthrough with them and tell them, yes, that's doable. No, that's unrealistic.
See, yeah, I agree with that. I really do. But the problem is some of them now are not even doing a walkthrough. They just throw the keys at you.
Yeah.
And so you have to be really careful who goes there and does that walkthrough, right? That operation, because if your team isn't communicating, because you got your sales guy, whether it's you, then you got your setup person, whatever you want to call them. Then you got your operations guy, and then you got your supervisor. So you got all these titles, and the communication falls behind, especially when the most important thing that the client specifically told you, because the sales guy was in a rush to bring the paperwork over, protect that soda fountain. I'm a bird lover, right? And make sure that thing is done, right? And you miss it first night, and you're done, right? Or they're very upset. So let's go back, and I'd like for you to share with somebody, how do you stay motivated when you're constantly putting out fires as an owner with scheduling payroll employees? What do you do to keep yourself motivated versus saying, you know what, and tell me if you've done this, I'm selling this thing. I'm done with this. I'm tired. I'm going to go open up a let this card or whatever, What do you do?
That's a very good question. And you know what? I actually gave it some thought not too long ago. And of course, there's been a lot of times where I just want to sell the company, just get out of it and say, screw it, I want to do something else. But I think the thing that motivates me is you have one bad day, and everybody has a bad day. And what I like to do is just get through that day. And I always tell myself, tomorrow's going to be another day. And maybe that other day is probably messed up too. Who knows? And then I'll say, tomorrow will be another better day. But the thing that has kept me motivated is looking back at everything that I've been through, almost hitting rock bottom, almost going out of business, and then just seeing, all the hardship, being a business owner, the struggles, borrowing money, doing this. And I think to myself, man, am I just going to just let it go? I've been through all this for me to just give up right now, just because I had one or two bad days. And I think once I reflect on that, and it just motivates me. It motivates me to just keep on going, and like you said, never give up. Just never give up. If you find yourself in that situation, my advice to all these business owners is never give up. Tomorrow will be another day. Look back on the good times that you had and all the struggles that you had to go through and endure just to get to the point where you are. And I feel like that'll help you. That'll help you get through it.
All right. So now we have the client problem. Now, for those that are married and have kids and responsibilities, right? Mm-hmm. What would a lot of us like to do? I'm the entrepreneur. I'm the one bringing home the bread, honey, right? Whether she has a full-time job or not, right?
Yeah.
We have a tendency to say, hey, it's an important client, babe. This is it. I got to go. I got to work the car. And that starts affecting home life. So you told me in the very beginning, your wife is working the back of the truck for you. That says a lot about her. Yeah. So you're very, very fortunate. And I think that is probably the best thing I've ever heard. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's no joke. I think that's absolutely amazing. What a heart. I mean, be driven like that, and how much love she cared about you to go sit and I don't care where you do, baby. I mean, that's like I'll go to work with you and you get your sleep. It's incredible, but it runs into a big issue. And it ran with me because I always thought I was right around the corner, and I'm never around the corner. And you guys are going to hear me say this all the time. I always thought I was around the corner. I was never around the corner. I was 1,000 miles around the corner. And then you have family and friends that are looking at you. They think, oh, your success. You really can't tell them and share the story, but you can only do so much at home. Taking that time away from your wife, especially your kids, being on the phone at the dinner table. They got homework to do. And, I've told, that's my biggest thing. And the thing I tell everybody, don't let it destroy your family life because, it destroyed mine. It really destroyed my first marriage. And it's still hard to this day. I probably wasn't raised. I didn't have the best example, big part of it. I'm doing therapy today, trying to balance it all out. That's another thing I'll get into at another time. But with you, has it come close to where your wife says, baby, enough's enough, figure it out, or sell this thing? Or is she just like, I'm with you 100%, and, I'll see you on the weekend?
Yeah.
Or give me one day a month?
Yeah.
Have you had those issues?
You know what? Of course. I think it's been a combination of both. I think her, like you said, sleeping in the back of the truck, and not just kind of changing shifts. She knows the business, which I'm glad. She understands the business and she knows what it takes. I think where it became a little tough is when the business starts growing, right? When you're not at home as much, or you're on your phone all the time. You're on phone calls all the time. And the way we've been able to balance, or I've been able to balance it at home, is you got to hire someone else. You got to bring someone else on board. Once you start realizing, my wife has told me this, hey, you know what, Eric, I've been with you, since the get-go. I get it. I know you have to come home. I know you got to take a phone call. But, lately, in the last, 6 months or a year, your business has really grown and it has really taken off, and I see you less, or you're on the phone all the time, or I'm talking to you, you're not paying attention to me. And then you don't really think of it until, you have your alone moment in the mornings, because I get up really early, and you start reflecting on some of these things. And I took it upon myself to, hire somebody and bring somebody else on board who can actually take care of those phone calls, who can actually answer those issues. And, and then so balancing that out, and then me going back to my wife and said, hey, look, I'm going to bring this person on board. So that way they can kind of, just take over those phone calls that you don't like me, that you don't like seeing me on all day, that I can answer those emails and all that. So it's just kind of working with her, and kind of compromising, meeting somewhere in the middle. She is going to understand that there's going to be times, that, hey, even though I do have help, I got to go, or I got to go check this property. There's an issue there. So it's been a combination of both, just getting somebody else to kind of take over and help you out.
Yeah. You say, hey, baby, I'm going to get you out of El Centro, and I'm going to buy you a house in Palos Verdes.
Yeah,
Go look at the water someday, right? And you've done it. Okay, now, you bring up a good point, and that's simple things to say. That's a simple thing to say. And, of course, we're going to hire somebody. But this industry doesn't have the dollar amount. So the problem is, I think that when mid-level operators get to that point, you have to be humble enough. You have to start from the very beginning as far as your training program and building your culture, a good culture. It has to be a good culture. It has to be trust, right? You have to be a good manager. You have to be able to delegate so you can build your business to a point where you can bring in good people and retain them. They understand the concept, the philosophy, the culture, right? So when you're speaking to you all the way down to your employee, and I use Sun State Security as a fine example, and I'm going to keep using them. I know nobody likes me to say this, but I'm telling you, whether I was talking to Glenn Burrell or Dennis Kelly or any one of his managers, all the way down from Ryan Moran, you feel like you're talking to the same person, and they do a really good job promoting their employees when somebody does a good job, those things. So if anybody wants to learn anything, that's a great company to take a look at. Your company, I haven't really been super involved in it, but where I'm going with that is that you're never going to find that one manager right away. And understand it's going to take 3 or 4 people to find that one person, that eagle, to come in to do the job. I try to tell people it's not going to be that first guy, and don't rush. Go with your gut, have your priorities, have your expectations set up, have your management program together before you even go there, because it will fail. It will discourage you, right? Or you'll get a bad guy in your operation who's only there to take your business or develops a relationship with your client because you step away and you feel confident and you want to be an entrepreneur now, and you don't get back. You're not involved in your business. You're not doing your weekly sync meetings. Is this making sense?
Definitely, yeah.
Right? So It wasn't your first guy that did it. And I imagine it was your second or third of learning how to manage your business. And it's very, very hard for small to mid-level, depending on your education, your background, your business degree. It's just a different world.
Exactly. Yeah.
So being in the car is real important. I encourage everybody to go for a ride because you get what you get when you inspect.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see why I need therapy. This is my PTSD, right? And part of the share. But let's do that, and I appreciate you sharing that. Let's go quickly, and then we'll end this thing. Tell me about real-time reporting from the beginning to the end. You're obviously you've been a customer of Silvertrek for many years. I've known you for how long?
Oh, wow. I want to say it was back from maybe 2015, 2016.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the conversation we had was the fact that I was out in the car too. We could share those experiences, right? And then incorporate that into the program for which I owned at the time.
Yeah.
No longer, of course, it was Silvertrek. Okay. So prior to that, you're taking your pictures and photos. Everything was about accountability. Silvertrek comes into play. And then, of course, today, now we're talking with a whole nother program.
Yeah.
Whole nother program that I'm super proud of with the partners that I have called Vision InSites, which takes us on a whole nother level because trying to explain to people, we're not trying to get back into the real-time reporting. We're trying to get back into a program that if we're going to build another tool, what are we going to build? We need to save time. Training's an issue, right? Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
All right. This is what you're supposed to do. Yeah, we have the tools, but it's not the tool. It's how you use it, number one. But the ability to take all that information I had in 29 years and then drop that into an AI program. I mean, just to think about it. Isn't it mind-blowing?
Yeah. No.
Think about some of the dynamic reporting we're doing with some of your properties. Yeah. Can you believe we've come this far? And here's the other question.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you had this 15 years ago?
Oof. Wow. Yeah.
Would it be mind-blowing? Think of all the hard work we put in, right? So is it the software or is it the experience that got us here? And that's what I try to share with Vision. Now that you look at it and you see that tool, are you saying, oh, just a software company somebody put together, or do you see experience in that tool?
Definitely. I obviously, comparing what Silvertrek was and Vision InSites, I mean, you could definitely see the progression there. Obviously, with people who have experience, even the little functions, little stuff here and there, everything you can think of a person who's actually been out on the field and who's had themselves, security experience, it all comes down to play in that software. That's very important. And it's funny, funny story. I first got onto Silvertrek, not because of accountability. It was because I had 1,000 pictures every day sent to my phone, timestamp photos. And I'm like, man, I got to find another way where I don't have to be looking through 1,000 pictures. So initially, that's the reason why I got into real-time reporting software, was because I wanted to get myself a little bit more organized. And then you realize the value of the software accountability. But no, this is a whole game changer. Now with AI into play, oh, my God. Yeah, definitely. I could see the value, and the client too. They could kind of see what you're doing out on the field. It's more like they're there with you. They see the pictures, they see the guards, they see the reports. It's like they're actually seeing, and at the same time, you're getting credit for what you're doing out there.
Right, and you can put anybody out there.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Kind of nice feature,
Well,
right?
I like
Think
that
about
bilingual feature that comes into play.
Orale.
That bilingual feature is one of the best ones. Obviously I have a couple guards, they're not very strong, in their English skills as far as, writing it. So when I was training them, I was telling them, hey, if you have a hard time writing it in English, just write it in Spanish and it'll translate it into English. Oh my God, that was a game changer for me.
Is it mind blowing?
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, the other side too, we said, well, let's put a training video in there because how many times your client call up and say, hey, you missed this or you missed that? You have to take the phone call. They have to call you. They don't want to do that. Now, with the ability to have that training video in there, and what I've done with the training videos and what we're doing with it as a group is putting those videos together to really educate them on why we're doing it and the purpose for that, right?
Exactly.
So who, what, when, where, and why.
It's true.
It is completely dialed in. And who better to put that training together versus the people that have been in the industry, and that's us.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I don't mention names, but my partner's background and us, it's going to be a strong thing to knock off because we want to provide the support. We don't want to do long-term contracts. We're here to help small to mid-level operators, and that's the approach we're taking with this program. So
definitely.
Your client feedback, how's it been since
Great.
you've been using it?
Great. I recently got a big contract, nearby here in Long Beach. It's come into play. Oh my God. I mean, I have to manage, a crew of maybe about 12 guards there. So just imagine, just having each one of them properly trained, seeing that. And then you start thinking, well, how am I going to show the client what my 12 guards are doing, in a simple way, in an easier, manner where they don't get overwhelmed with pictures and none of that. And now with using this software, they can just click on there. It'll just take him. I mean, and you have all these, obviously filters and stuff. But no, it's just been a game changer. They love it. They love the incident reports. They love everything about it.
Yeah, it's paperless, right?
Definitely.
Do you like the look? Do you think they like we call it the Apple look, right? The branding, right?
Yeah.
That dark mode kind of click. It goes on their phone. They click on it. They open it up. It's all there. I mean, have you ever thought that you'd never have to edit a report again?
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying there's not issues at times where
Yeah.
you have to do that, but it's really, for an example, there was a homicide.
Yeah.
And there was somebody hit, and it was pretty graphic photos. They're 4K. We're not compressing them in an app. That's the great part. And we have the carousel from the view. So stuff like that, we can't have that displayed. So we were able to help with that.
Yeah,
but I think the ability for the clients to be able to view that quality, it keeps the enhanced note for court. So I want everybody to understand we're not eliminating what was written.
Yeah.
That's backed up for court purposes. The client sees the enhanced note. But more, it's now... Let me ask you, it's more story-based. In other words, it's like a Reader's Digest. Do you remember that book?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, it tells a story, right? It's kind of a narrative of what took place, and having that as the insight report for the client to kind of view before they go through the reports if they want is one thing. But the best part is there's no such thing as like vandalism, trespass, and having to sit down and write your bullshit issue types, bullshit locations, right? And have that, read the story, and create a title like a chapter in a book.
Yeah, definitely.
And nobody's going to be able to do, I honestly believe. And then with our experience with the proper language, for an example, multi-housing, it's not a security gate, it's a gated community.
Yeah.
Right? A resident at an apartment is a resident, it's not a tenant. That's more commercial based.
Exactly.
Or old school C&D property, that kind of thing. So be able to take all the risk, liability terms and have that dropped in. There's a difference between ChatGPT correcting a narrative, which some people think that's what Vision's about. No, it's years and years of experience as the originator of real-time reporting when I started that game way back then to now. And I think I'm super proud of it and love having clients like you to hear the feedback that's going to help you grow your business, retain your existing contracts. And the biggest part is the ability not to put you in a long-term contract and provide you support. Do you get support?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Would you recommend anybody that's coming to you today and say, if another software solution came to you and said, hey, We'll give you payroll, give you scheduling, we'll give you real-time reporting. And I try to tell these guys, don't get into a long-term contract, especially with AI and development. The last thing you want to do is get locked into a program.
Exactly.
Small to mid-level security companies cannot afford a $2,000 check up front and then go into a monthly and then go into a contract. And then if somebody can't support the real-time reporting, why in the hell would I want to have you do my scheduling and my payroll for me? Right?
Yeah,
if you can even
right.
pick up the phone and handle that, why would I want to go any other direction and get locked into it? And it just burns me.
Yeah.
It does. So,
Yeah, no, I agree.
yay, nay, am I wrong?
Oh, no. I think you touched on one of the nicest features that I like is that summary right at the beginning. Because property managers, they don't have time to go over, 15 pages, 20 pages.
That's right.
So they're going to see that summary, and if something piques their interest where they feel they got to look into it a little bit more, then they will. They'll look into it more. But no, that's definitely a game changer, definitely. Because these guys are busy themselves. They just want to get straight to the point and move on,
Well, that's good. But I do want to say this. I'd love to have you back. That's part of the reason why you're here. I think you run a really good business from what I've seen and what I've heard and the time I've spent with you. And it makes me proud that you're a Vision customer because we don't want to just sell it to anybody. But I look forward to sharing maybe some of my helping you in any coaching or anything that you need in the future, especially with real-time reporting or just general conversation. I appreciate like you coming today and giving feedback so other operators and people can hear, that we're all going through the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Make it fun.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. So if I can, lucky enough, I hope to have you back.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you coming here. And then you are going to invite me to your house in Palo Verdes when you get this all dialed in.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I can come see how the rich people live up there, right?
That's right. Yeah, you're welcome anytime.
All right. And by the way, kudos, I'll say, and congratulations for getting, sounds like one hell of a woman.
Yeah.
How long have you been married now?
12 years.
12 years?
Yeah, 12 years, yeah. We got an 8-year-old daughter, 12 years. So,
Fantastic.
Yeah. She's been up and down, She's been, like they say, right, my partner in crime.
Well, good. Well, take my
Ride or
advice.
die.
Take my advice, my experience, and make sure you don't destroy that.
Yeah,
Right?
of course.
Business, because this business will kill you.
Definitely.
So hopefully we can help other people to take that in mind too. All right.
Yeah, definitely.
All right.
Appreciate
Well,
it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, buddy.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Hey, everyone. No matter where you're watching from, if you get anything out of this, please like and subscribe. And most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.